Thank you very much, Chairperson. Greetings to the Commander-in-Chief of the EFF, Julius Sello Malema, EFF officials, commissars, the leaders of the Progressive Caucus, and sympathizers of the revolutionary movement in Africa that turns 11 years old on the 27th of July. To be young is to be in a stage of becoming, of working towards your goals and aspirations to transition from being dependent to independent. However, the youth of this country are perpetual children, and some will never know independence until their old age. At the realization of how doomed we are under your leadership, Mr. President, thousands continue to give in to Nyaupe, and young women and girls amount to bottle girls for you and your friends at the peak of their vibrancy and zeal for life and prosperity. We live with our parents, and finding a 40-year-old man asking his mother for bread is more common than otherwise. This phenomenon is known as the Ramaphosa economy. Joblessness, poverty, and constantly questioning if we are truly the young adults of today. In 2018, Mr. President, you launched a jobs summit and promised the youth of this country 275,000 jobs per year. You failed. In 2019, you promised 2 million jobs and an end to hunger, halving of crime, and empowering the school curriculum where a 10-year-old will be able to read for comprehension. You failed. In 2020, you unveiled a 100 billion rand fund to create jobs in the public sector for the youth. You failed. You launched the NSP against GBV and femicide, and 4 years later, on the eve of elections 2024, the murderer of Kirisaleti Elsin Donje was granted bail of 2,000 rands. You failed. In 2021, you spoke about building new cities, and the National Youth Development Agency would fund 1,000 young entrepreneurs in 100 days. You failed. In 2022, plagued by your own failures over the years, you promised the National Youth Service would create a modest 50,000 jobs in its first phase. You failed. In 2023, you came here and praised yourself for the Youth Employment Service that placed 100,000 youth in peace jobs that lasted nothing more than 12 months. Once again, you failed. Yesterday, you came to this house and promised 2 million jobs to the youth of South Africa. It is thus fair and deliberate to then say that this time next year, the result will once again be not achieved and failed. When you became president in 2018, youth unemployment was sitting at 43%. And nearly 7 years into your presidency, youth unemployment currently sits at 45% for individuals aged 15 to 34, and a whopping 59% for young people aged 15 to 24. Your presidency is characterized by many promises and many failures. It is now apparent that as the youth of today, we must ready ourselves psychologically like the youth of 1976 for the biggest fight against the establishment. The establishment has charged you, Mr. President, at the forefront as the weapon that is formed against us. The youth of today, like Nelson Mandela, who is now hailed as an icon of peace, must be ready to be called terrorists. We must be ready to be called criminals. We must be ready to be jailed for crimes we did not commit. We must be ready to be character assassinated like Idam Mntwana, Robert Sobukwe, Nkgopotshe Tiro, Steve Biko, Winnie Mandela, and Julius Malema. But amongst ourselves as the youth of this country, we know who the true criminals are. We know who stole our land from our grandmothers. We know who stole our mines. We know who stole COVID-19 funds that was meant to keep our people alive. We know who stole Tembisa Hospital money. We know who stole SAA, ISCO, Sasol, Telkom. We know who is now stealing Eskom, Transnet, PRASA, and even privatizing our water. All the while, you are creating an impression that these are natural disasters, despite the fact that they are orchestrated by the true criminals of the government of today, deployed by the Oppenheimers. We know who stole the money that is meant to eradicate pit toilets in the Eastern Cape. We know who stole NSFAS money. We know the mafias of the Steenhof heist. We know the thugs of the Skills Development Fund, and we definitely know who the #1 money launderer is. There is absolutely nothing that the establishment, masquerading as a government of national unity, can do to deter us, the youth of today, from seeking out our generational mission. The government of the ANC has not fooled all of us. It is under the ANC that we saw privatization of state-owned entities at a large scale, much higher than that of the apartheid government. A trail of privatization that is so aggressive that even our health care isn't spared through the NHI. The rise of the establishment and the collapse of the state takes shape under the government of the ANC. That is the legacy of the ANC today. The positive outcomes of all of this neoliberal facade of the government of the day is that we now rightly characterize the neoliberal agenda encompassing of all its participants who are part of the GNU coalition. We now know who the enemy of economic freedom is. Even if in the past they pretended to be a part of us and spoke like the forefathers of the emancipation movement. The battle lines have been drawn. It is the subject of the Oppenheimer, the GNU coalition versus the people of South Africa. The youth of this country will continue to chant economic freedom in our lifetime. We will continue to present bills in this house that call for expropriation of land without compensation. We will continue to call for nationalization of mines, banks, and other strategic sectors. We will push back against your corruption and hold the captains of the ruling class accountable. We will fight for the scrapping of student debt and continue to call for quality, free, and decolonized education in our lifetime. We will continue to call for free health care, housing, water, and sanitation. We will continue to remind you that the young people in this country deserve real jobs. It's 6 months. We want industrial development, insourcing of security guards and cleaners, free pads, Mr. President, and all those rent manipulators to be arrested and to rot in jail. The people's power is rising in Africa, and we will not be left behind.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will now call upon the Minister.